And what I'm going to do now is demonstrate for you how to draw a value scale, then how to draw and shade a sphere, a cube, a cylinder, and a cone. So I think what I need to do first is just talk to you about tone, what it is, and how it works. It's a separate idea to line. It's a separate technique to using line, but they both work together in drawing, and they're both really important. This is an example of what you might design on Friday, an original character of your own. This is what we're about to do now. This is a value scale. It's quite simply 9 different values of tone, from 0 value, nothing, to as dark as you can make it with an 8B pencil, 6B or an 8B pencil. And then you're going to go on and explore these basic geometric forms. And that simply means the simplest three-dimensional forms that we have in geometry. Excuse me. So geometry is sort of the... oh, sorry, let me just turn my computer screen off because it makes this loud fan noise. I've noticed that listening back to the recordings that there's a fan noise. So a geometric form is a sort of the simplest three-dimensional form we have, right? So we've got cubes, and I've got a sphere somewhere as well. But you know, a sphere, which is like a ball, is a simple version of, you know, something like that. A sphere is part of, you could say, you know, the construction of a skull is partly spherical. It's got a kind of a sphere shape. Okay, so when you can understand and know how to draw a sphere, well, you can draw other complex things. When you can use tone to draw a cube well, you can draw many other things. If you can use tone to draw a cylinder, you can draw many other things. All right, so that's it really. So we're going to start with I think a sphere or a cube, and then we'll do cylinder. And you're going to use tone everywhere. You'll have a few lines, but you're mainly using tone. See that? Mainly tone. And we're going to use a bit of perspective for the cube and the cylinder. 2-point perspective. All right. So there's, you know, different ways to do it. Everyone will have their own style, I suppose. But basically, that's what we're doing. So tone, if you're not aware, tone is it's generally what we call the different values of light. Okay, so low tone, medium tone, darker value tone, or darker tone, darker tone. So tone is the use of a pencil or a medium to indicate darker or lighter values. And it's really copying light. Right? Light, less light, less light, less light, less light again. So a shadow is the absence of light, and a pencil can be used to show that shadow. All right, that's about it. That's an example of what you might do on Friday. Okay, let's begin. So the first thing I want you to do is a value scale. And to do that, I just want you to draw up 10 little boxes, about 25 centimeters square. Just use a ruler for that, and then I'm going to get you to use your 6B or your 8B pencil, and we'll do it. And I think I've left my ruler somewhere. Where's my ruler? Yep, I can see it over there. 1 second, guys. Now you might use a 2B pencil to draw the boxes if you want. That would be just fine. I'll just use a 6B here because it's handy. And I'll make them, I think, 3 centimeters each is fine. So just begin with a little light line. Just measure maybe, actually I'll make it 25 millimeters square. Now this one's broken, look at that. That's fun, isn't it? Okay, so about 25. That will do. You don't. I'd like them to be neat boxes, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then just work away along. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just use the edge of my ruler here like that, because it's quicker. And I want you to draw 10 little boxes. It's nice to have a ruled edge so it looks a bit neater. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That'll do. Because I want one to be 0 and one to be a value of... I'll just write 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 10 boxes, but one's going to have 0 in it, and the others are going to be all different values. So the way to begin this, oh, you know what? I've put this on a big sheet of paper. I want it to be on a smaller one. So I'm just going to tear that. Otherwise I won't be able to turn my page around very easily. And with tone, you really do want to be able to move your page around. So I'm just going to tear this and make it a bit smaller. So just using A3 would be best. I had an A2. Okay, so the trick here is 6B or an 8B pencil. Please. And you want to start with really lightly, okay? And I'm going to start on the side here. So I've got the side of my pencil. I should really talk a bit about tone. So tone is, you know, this is a line, and tone is where we start to use the side of a pencil. And it can be good actually as a practice to warm up, just to hold your pencil on its side and really just explore how heavily you can push and how lightly you can push. So this is a 6B, but I've also got this 8B, and you'll find that the 8B gives me a slightly darker effect. So you could perhaps try a combination of the two. I wouldn't really use a 2B for this, it's just a bit too soft. So I'd probably work with a 6B and an 8B, maybe a 4B and an 8B. Alright? But this is tone, that's all it is. It's the idea of light, you know, shadow and light. So I want 0 value here, right up to as strong as you can. So the best way I've found to get students to do this is to start really lightly, and that's too dark already, I can tell. Sorry, I forgot what I was doing. Start really lightly. I'll actually grab the 6B. And have a little practice sheet somewhere so you can it's important not to push too heavily. If you push too heavily in the first one, you're going to cause yourself some problems. So just go really light in the first one, and then go about the same in the second, and then you could increase it slightly as you're going along. Okay, now the idea here is if you if you start too dark too soon, you'll be in trouble, but you can always add value. So it's very hard to erase the value. So starting lighter is a really good idea. So now just a little bit heavier here. And what you want is a clear difference between each step. Now I can go a little bit heavier, not too much heavier, just a little bit heavier again. And just try to keep them within the square. Okay, a little bit heavier again for 5. And remembering this is my 6B. A little bit heavier each time. And just try to keep it consistent. Fill your boxes evenly with tone if you can. It's going to look neater and it'll show me you're in control. So 0, 1, 2, a little bit darker for 3 now. Don't add too much more to 1 or 2 yet. As I say, you can always come back. So that's probably enough. Now darker again for 4, but not too heavy. Darker again for 5. Darker again for 6. 7. 8. And 9. Okay, now I'm going to change to the 8B because I can feel the 6B running out of puff a bit. So what I'll do is I'll just very carefully increase the value of 4. Again, very carefully. 5, a little bit more, trying to keep it flat. 6, a little bit heavier, etc. In fact, I'm just going to put this underneath because I'm feeling the paper, the board through the bottom here. All right, pretty good. So looking back at my steps here, right? Boom, boom, boom. This could be a little bit darker. That's pretty good. This could be darker now. This is the 8B. A little bit harder now for 5. So yeah, right now I'm pushing quite hard. Not very hard, but quite hard. A little bit harder again. And now, pretty hard. So what I'm seeing is I can get more out of the pencil still. Right, I can definitely get number 9 a few steps darker, and it's good to know that. Okay, but I've got to make sure. See how these look the same? 6, 7, and 8 look about the same. 5 and 6 are a bit too similar, so I need there to be more even steps. Everyone needs to look different. So go back down here. I might grab the 6B again, and I'll just make sure that 2 is a good step up from 1. And then I'll make sure that 3 is a good step up from 2. And now 4 needs a bit more. So Again, this is the 6B. Okay, now that's not going to get me much further, so I'm changing to the 8B for 5. Pushing harder for 6. Harder again for 7. Bit harder again for 8. And then really hard for 9. So 9 is full on, right? As hard as you can get. So I'm holding my pencil now in what I sort of call the precision mode. This is where you really hold it hard and close to the end. Okay, it's like the mode you use for lines. So what I can see now is I can get a little bit darker with 8. Take it really close to the 9, but not all the way, and then a little bit darker with 7. All right, and maybe you could mix a little bit. So I got the 6B here. Maybe I can mix in a bit of the 6B to help lift these a bit. And then extra heavy again. All right, so something like that, taking your time with it. I think that it's a bit hard to see in the camera, this little camera here, but I think that's they're different enough. It's pretty good. It's a bit similar here. So what I'm looking for when I'm marking your folio is can you show a slightly different step in each one? All right, so that's basically the first task, and we call that the value scale. All right, so just take your time, maybe spend a good half an hour, 45 minutes on that till you're happy. And if you make a mistake, if you can't fix it, it's very hard to take away the tone. So if you can't take it away, if you can't fix it, just do a second one. All right, so that's part 1. Let me just get some more paper here. Okay, so now we're going to start with the sphere, I think. The sphere is pretty good. It's quite hard to do, but it's also covers all the different types of shadows. So basically a sphere is a circle that is expanded into a three-dimensional world. So it's, instead of it being a circle, it's actually, three-dimensional. So to draw a sphere, we need to start with a circle and then add tone. And the simplest way to think about it is that you've got a circle, you've got light coming from somewhere. Let's imagine that's the sun. And the light comes in and it hits the ball on one side, and the other side is in shadow. And then it casts a shadow onto the surface, depending on what surface it's sitting on. So this is called the cast shadow, C-A-S-T. This is called the form shadow. And this is variously called the halftone or the bright side. It's the bright side, the dark side. I'll just call it the half tone. In other words, it's not really dark tone, it's a little bit of tone. And you also will normally have a bright spot or a highlight, which is basically the light being reflected into our eyes from the sun. So it bounces in. And that's it. That's the range of tones, typical on a sphere. But there is one part of the form shadow that's darker than the rest, and we call that the core shadow. Okay, it's the darkest part. That's called the core shadow. So you sort of have to understand that much. Okay, and then these ideas will pass on to other objects. So a sphere, you can think about it like this. You've got sort of the brightest value on that side, the medium value, and then the darkest value maybe on the shadow, and perhaps also in the core. Right? So the core and the cast shadow might be a 3 value. This might be a 2 value, and this might be a 1 value. In other words, just like we did here, you know, your core shadow might be a 6 or a 7, or a 5 or a 6. Your halftone value might be a 3 or a 4, or a 2 or a 3. And then your brightest side might be a 1. Your highlight might be a 0. So normally to shade any three-dimensional object, you just need to have 3 different values. As long as you've got 3 distinct values, brightest, medium and darkest, or brightest, medium and darkest, or whatever, if we can see 3 different values, then we will see 3 dimensions. So 3 values equals 3 dimensions. It's a really important idea to remember. So we're doing it for the sphere, we'll also do it for the cube. All right, 1, 2, 3. And then also a cast shadow, which might be 3 as well, or it might be 2. As long as there's 3 different values, we'll see a 3-dimensional cube. All right. So the first part to drawing a sphere is to draw a nice circle. So just do your best. Maybe warm up. This is what's called ghosting. This is where you move your hand in the direction that you want it to go in before you touch the pencil. So I'm sort of moving it in a circular shape before I touch the pencil down. And it just allows for a kind of a smoother line. It takes practice, and I'm a bit rusty, so I have to warm up a little bit. So it can be good just to fill a page with circles sometimes. All right. But, you know, just drawing lightly is good because it means you can adjust things a bit more easily later. So I'll start with that, and then I think it's good to have a little horizon line somewhere. So we kind of established that this is sitting on a surface. And then what I want you to do is just sort of imagine the light's coming from, say, here. Off to the side, top side, right? And if the light's coming that direction, the cast shadow is going to sort of fall under there, isn't it? Because the light's coming down and casting a shadow onto here. And because it's landing on a surface, it's going to make a shape that follows that surface. In this case, it's going to be an ellipse. So there's actually going to be an ellipse sitting in here. See that? And it starts here and finishes there. So that's the shape of your cast shadow in this instance. If I wanted to make the light look like it's closer to me instead of over there, but also back in this direction, I would just make this a fatter ellipse. like that. But it's still going to be an ellipse. All right, and then the idea is that you need another ellipse here. You want to put an ellipse here to sort of show us that the light is hitting this ball, this three-dimensional ball. And roughly speaking, on this side is going to be the darker side, and on the top part is going to be the brighter side. All right, and then you can quickly, if you want, just indicate where the shadow is going to fall. And the tricks with shadows are a couple of tricks. One is the edges are always soft, a little bit soft. You don't want them too hard. So if you draw a strong shape around the edge, it'll look like an object instead of a shadow. So you want to have a fairly soft edge. And you want to make your shadow darker the closer you are to your object. So the closer it gets in under there, just make it a little bit darker. The idea is that light comes from all around, you know, light bounces off other surfaces and brightens up a shadow. So shadows are truly only darker when they're further away from other surfaces. In other words, the light can't get in there. It becomes a bit like a cave, you know, and the light can't get all the way to the back of the cave. So you can just sort of fade that out, something like that. All right. I've got a few messy lines there, so I'll just lift those off a bit and try to make that a bit smoother. Yeah, so your ellipse is basically the beginning of the object going into shadow. And then the core shadow normally occurs, you know, somewhere in that section, right? And it depends on the brightness of the surface, you know, the brightness of the ground, the surface of the ball, how much other light's in the room, etc. But just for a quick sort of, what's the word? As a kind of an illusion, as a way to make it look realistic, you just put your core shadow there somewhere and you just have it not too dark. Sorry, it gets brighter towards the edge. So see how I'm getting close to the edge of the circle, but I'm not getting all the way to the edge. So the core shadow is normally darkest only for a small part of that shadow side. It's not the whole shadow. And that's because light comes down and bounces up here, you know, and hits the back edge of your sphere. And then you just want to sort of soften. You want your transitions to be soft. So we're transitioning from a darker shadow to a halftone, right? Pop in a little halftone here. So we want that transition to be fairly smooth. And there's many different ways to shade, right? You could use you can even use lines to make shadow effects and stuff. I do think tone, using the side of your pencil, is the best way to show value. But you can sort of build up tone with some line work as well. So what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, the highlight, the halftone, and then transitioning into the form shadow side. And what I'm also conscious of is I'm sort of following the contour. See that shape there? That's kind of like the contour of the ball. So the more I can follow that shape, the sort of more realistic it's going to be. And as I say, try different, you know, notice in the videos there's slightly different ways that people will shade their spheres, but I want you to do this from your imagination. I don't want you to be looking at an actual ball here, because I'm trying to teach you a principle. All right, now that's pretty good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to build up a little bit of tone in the background so that it's sort of easier for this to pop, visually pop, when we look at it. And I add a little bit of tone to the ground as well, just a little bit. So it's going to start to sort of look a little bit more like a sort of a real object, you could say. And now what I want to do is just neaten up my edge a bit. My edge is not very circular, so I'm just going to go around it. And notice that I'm resting my wrist here, which is sort of helping me get a better circle. I mentioned this last week. You can sort of use the mechanics of your hand, right, to help you draw certain shapes. Now the trick with tone, like we did with the value scale before, is to build it up slowly. You don't want to go too hard too soon, and I can see my lips is a bit small. I want to just make that a little bit larger. Just bring it into there and bring it out the back there a little bit more. It's just a little bit small, I think. And thinking about it fading, right, at the edges, so it's not too hard. And thinking about it being really dark in here. So this might be a value 8 or 9 on a value scale now. And then paying attention to the shape. Okay, good. Not bad. Now I'm going to pop a little ruler here just to give myself this line as a neat sort of edge. What I could even do is sit the ruler there and use it as a kind of a bouncing, you know, rubbing the pencil up against it. And that actually just helps me get it a little bit darker and straight. So the idea here is that the tone should be even, or normally your tone should be flat or even or consistent. If you have too much texture in your tone, it'll look more like a surface graphic and less like a surface. In other words, it'll look like there's something drawn onto something else rather than just being a three-dimensional object. All right, now I have to make a decision here, you know, which to make brighter. I'll probably make the background here a little bit darker than the ball. So I'll just build that tone up a bit more. And, you know, this is just a way to help you. It's a way for me to help show my ball as a three-dimensional object. So I can, you know, I'm in control here of the little world of my sphere. So I can make that background fade, you know? Something like that. Try not to rely too heavily on the line here. I really want you to rely on the tone. So this is quite different to what we did in week 1. All right, so we're sort of building it up slowly. Even though it was quite messy at the start, you can see it's not too hard to build it up to be a convincing form. I'm going to go a bit darker here. Really using the side. And a little bit darker towards the edge, but not very dark, not all the way up. This is going to give me this effect of what we call reflected light. But all the way as if the shadow is sort of, it's a bit messy in there, isn't it? I think I need to lift a bit of that. You know, you'll make mistakes. Just try to make them less obvious. You know, try to fix them with eraser and pencil work. You can fix most mistakes, I think. I could possibly even just make this a little bit darker there. And that'll sort of help hide that mistake. See that? See, I'm kind of using a cross-hatching effect here. It's tone, but it's kind of got, there's a little bit of a sense of the line work. All right, and that's roughly what you're doing. All right. It's a little bit messy around here, so I could neaten that up a bit. Perhaps give that line a little bit more emphasis. If I do it again from this side, if I rest my hand on here, I should be able to get a slightly, on my pencil. This is what happens when you drop your pencils. But anyway, that's roughly the task right there. All right, so that's our sphere. So again, to break it down, you've got a circle. You decide where your light's coming from. You put an ellipse on the ground for the cast shadow. You put an ellipse on the side that follows the direction of the sun. And then the bottom half is the form shadow, the top half is the half tone, and you know, probably there's your three values, 1, 2, 3, and then you add a highlight somewhere, and that's pretty much it. All right, that's the sphere done. Now we'll move straight on to the cube. Okay, a cube is basically, we're going to do it using 2-point perspective, but it's basically a three-sided object, okay? And in real life, because these are parallel, then in my drawing, because of perspective, we're going to make them appear as if they're coming towards what we call a vanishing point. So these lines, to be correct, must be converging. They must appear to be getting smaller out the back. So this line, or height, should be a little bit shorter than this one. Right? And if we were to measure it, you would see that that's about 3.8. That's about 3.3. So A is getting smaller. That's what's making these lines come together. And this height here, let's call it C, you know, it's got to be less than 3.8. You know, so about 3.2 or 3. About there, looks good. So as long as the lines are getting smaller, it's going to look fairly correct. And again, you're going to want to go for the 3 different values idea. 1, 2, 3. You know, brightest, medium, darkest. And then obviously whichever side's got the darkest shadow, that's the side that the cast shadow is going to be coming off. So you whack a little cast shadow out there. And that's it. Alright, so we'll do one of those. Now the trick to doing a cube in perspective, especially 2-point perspective, is to put it on a little horizon, but to sit it, below the horizon, maybe, as if it's sitting on a desk. So again, like the sphere, I'll just imagine it's sitting on a desk. And I'm going to actually make my lines vertical, because a 2-point perspective drawing, I could make these converge at the bottom, but I'm going to just use 2-point perspective. In a 2-point perspective, the only converging lines are the ones that go out the side here. So you start like that. You pick a sort of a position for the height. Let's imagine I want to make mine about here. Okay, and I just decide, okay, I'm going to put my horizon over here. I'm going to put my vanishing point somewhere over here. And then I just try to make these lines look like they're going to that same point. See that? And then of course, where this one hits here, I want to send this back to this side of the horizon line. And this line as well goes to the same point. And by having them all go to the same point, it starts to look three-dimensional. Okay, so roughly speaking, let me just get a pencil with a longer stem. Roughly speaking, that could be my little, cube. It's probably enough that I can work with. I'm just going to check that my lines are nice and straight. As you can see, I kind of guessed the position of the lines. And I think that's fine. As long as it looks a bit like a cube, you could say it's a cube, all right? So if you just look at that, ask yourself, does that look like a cube? It's maybe a little bit long. That might be better. And here, this one feels a little bit tall, so I might make this go back a bit further. Just a bit deeper here. Now that looks too long, doesn't it? So that might have been okay. Yeah, that's okay. All right, and now where this line crosses this line, it's the start of this one. And this line runs towards that vanishing point. So it's sort of about there. And where this line crosses this line, it runs back towards this vanishing point. So it's actually a bit lower than that. That's a bit high, so I'll drop that one down. You can use a ruler if you want, but I don't think it's a good habit to use a ruler for perspective when you're planning your drawing. I think it's okay when you've got it all figured out and you want to add some real sharp edges, but my general approach, I think, to drawing is to work really lightly and build up slowly. All right, that looks pretty good. See, I'm comfortable to grab the ruler now just to pop in a little horizon line. It's not bad. It looks a little bit forced somehow. I feel like this line's a bit low. I might just lift it a little bit. Anyway, that'll do for now. Okay, so let's imagine the light. I'll put the light on this side this time. Light's coming down there, which means this will be my darkest, that'll be my medium, that'll be my brightest. And it's simply a matter of adding some tone now. So working quite lightly for the top one. You don't want too much value on your brightest side. And this will be my medium side. and this will be my dark side. So a bit like the value scale, you want to try to be consistent. This is a 6B, I want an 8B. You want to be consistent. Or even is another word for it. What I'm adding more paper behind because I can feel the board and it's a bit too textured, I think. All right, so let's just pretend that's our darkest side. This is a bit too bright, so I'll add some more here. Again, it's good to go slowly. You don't want to have too dark too soon. Make this a bit darker. You know, you can even leave, I could have left the top side white or almost empty of tone if I wanted to. That would have been fine. All right, so it's starting to show through, right? You can start to see it. I'll just lift a little bit of that off. Now, because my light's over here, because this is the darkest, my cast shadow must go off on that side somewhere. Now, there's different ways to do this. We can do it really accurately, or we can just do it roughly. Now, I think rough is fine for the most part. Okay, basically, the shadow is going to go off there. But if you look at that angle there, right? That's the angle of the side. So if there is a shadow running over here, it's also going to come off here. So you could add a little bit to the side there. And generally with shadows, you can just sort of fade them off, because shadows do just fade away. Or you could maybe try to make it a little bit more precise. So you could maybe do a bit of that. But again, you don't want a hard edge. You want it to be fairly soft. So this line here is being projected down to here. You know, this corner is projected to here, this corner is projected to here, and this corner is projected to here. So it's the same as the sphere in that it's darker at the base and it gets lighter as you go out. Darker at the base and it gets lighter as you go out. And no, not a strong edge, so just let that soften off. I mean, the truth is you would see a fairly sharp edge right up here where you're close to it, just there, but not out here. Okay, now I'm just going to make that line a little bit darker. And yeah, you can use your eraser to help. All right, that looks pretty good. So now I could just build up a little bit more strength. I might get my ruler out now just to neaten up some of these lines. But like I say, there's a difference. You don't want to really do that too soon, and try not to don't make your lines too dark here for this one, because it'll look less like an object and more like a drawing. You know, I want it to look a little bit realistic, and the way to make it realistic is to use mainly tone. But that ruler is just helping me get a nice sharp edge. And what I could do here is I could use that edge, the ruler, to help me add some tone to the background. I'll show you what I mean. So there's a little bit of tone on the top plane of the cube. And I could even put the ruler here. And that'll help me sort of build this up. Again, this is just to help the drawing sort of pop off the page a little bit. Just very carefully adding a slightly harder edge for that line. It's not super good, this one. It's a little bit messy. I'm very conscious that if I put my head any further forward, which is where I'd like it to be, I'm going to block the camera with it, so it makes it a little bit hard for me to see what I'm doing here. But look, that's not bad. You know, it's not bad. So a little bit of light tone here maybe. Again, just to sort of make it look a bit more like a scene rather than a drawing. If you draw the background when you're making a drawing, you add context to your drawing. So it looks a little bit more like a real thing rather than a drawing of a thing. And then you can, of course, make this a really nice shape. You know, you could soften all that away. Just kind of give it a little nice effect like that. And pretty soon you can start to see, hopefully, that it's looking a little bit three-dimensional. All right. Now, look, my perspective isn't perfect, but it's roughly correct. And we've got three values: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter which side you put your shadow on, by the way. You can have it on any side, as long as it follows logic. You know, I could make this a little bit darker. My battery's about to die, so I'm aware of that right now. And I could make this a bit darker and more consistent. So if your drawing's looking a bit flat, just increase the value of your number 3 value. Or your shadow, your cast shadow. And normally that will make it pop a bit more. Yeah, there's a bit of an error. I made a mistake in the back here a little bit. But it's okay. I mean, you know, I could add an edge, a line. It's okay to do that. But I'd rather you sort of built these mainly with tone. So this is a little bit wrong through here, so I just want to adjust that a little bit. I feel like that's a little bit incorrect. So I suppose feel free, you know, to finish off your drawing in a way that's pleasing to you. As long as it's predominantly using tone to make your basic geometric form come to life. Yeah, I can see that that's a little bit high through there. Just drop it down a little bit. As soon as I can put my head right over the top of my drawing, I can see the mistakes. But the beauty of a drawing like this is you can, you know, if you work lightly, you can pretty much fix most errors as you go. So that, maybe with a slightly darker edge there, is not bad, except for this heavy line. All right, so that's our cube. Okay, I'm just going to change my battery and then I'll move on to do the cylinder and the cone. Oh, there's a spare battery right there. Oh, I see. I'll take it out of there first, Shane. Okay, loosen that. Okay, that should be pretty good. Let's put that there to focus. Zoom out. Yeah, that's pretty good. Zoom in. Good. Okay. So we've done the cube, we've done the sphere. Now we'll move on and we'll do the cylinder. Cylinder's hard because you need an ellipse. Ellipses are quite hard. So to the extent to which you're confident with your ellipses will probably mean this will work, you know, well or not. But basically a cylinder is, it's kind of like the idea of a cube again, where you've got some perspective. Right, these lines are running off towards a vanishing point. Okay, if you keep that in mind, then a cylinder, right, because a circle can be bounded by a square, then if you've got a cube here, and if we extend the cube in one direction, all right, that gives us a rectangular prism. And then if we pop an ellipse on here, it gives us the illusion of a circle within a square. And that's what a cylinder is. A cylinder is a kind of a circle that's been extruded. So that's roughly how you create a cylinder. Vanishing point, two ellipses, but then the lines don't actually touch out here, they touch the edges of the ellipse. So they're slightly closer in, you see? So that's the complex way to do it. You can do it really formally like that, and you can, you know, build it up slowly. Or you can use the Shane technique, which is much quicker. But the ideas are the same as before, right? Light's coming from one side. There's going to be a shadow, a core shadow, the darkest part of the shadow, which will be on one half, or part of one half. There'll be a kind of a highlight on the other half, and then there'll be a cast shadow. Right, and that's roughly a cylinder. I'll just do a quick edge to it to kind of show you. Right, that's roughly a cylinder. You know, and you can put that on a table if you wanted. And if you put a sort of a flat tone at this end, it'll make that look flat but slightly in shadow. All right, so and then you just want to finesse your cast shadow a little bit, depending on the surface. Let's just make it straight. You know, it might be something like that. All right, so that's roughly a cylinder. The quickest way to do it though is to basically draw two lines that are coming together slightly, and then turn them around, and your ellipse will pop in here. Now the trick to an ellipse is that the shortest axis, which is that one, must point along the center line of your cylinder. Okay, and then no matter how long it is, the second ellipse for your cylinder will also run in that same direction. The minor axis points in that direction. So an ellipse has two axes. You've got a short side and a long side. Right, no matter what shape, how fat or thin it is, or how big it is, there's always a short side or short axis and a long axis. See that? And an ellipse is symmetrical on that side as well as that side. So an ellipse must be smooth, have a short axis, a long axis. They will be 90 degrees to each other, and then all those quadrants will be the same. You know, that's the same as that, and that's the same as that. Okay, so a cylinder is, if it's lying flat, it's going to run towards the vanishing point, and you're going to have a little ellipse in here whose minor axis is following the center point. Similar one up the back. Okay, and then basically you've got wherever your light's coming from, let's say it's coming from here, sort of on the top, that means your form shadow is on that bottom half. Your half tone or your brighter values on the top half. There'll be a little highlight somewhere, and then the tone will be gradual, and then at a certain point there'll be a core shadow, really dark bit, just like the sphere. Okay, and then underneath here your shadow will begin, your cast shadow will begin, and like the others, it'll be darkest underneath. It'll sort of, you know, depending on the direction, it might sit like that. So it's going to get a little bit softer as it gets out here. All right, boom, 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 and then this is a nice ellipse. This is a nice ellipse here. Can you see how that's taking shape? Just make this flat. And then now, by the way, an ellipse doesn't have any pointy bits, so when you're joining an ellipse to a straight line, it's got to be a lovely gradual curve, not a point. So they never come to a point. So let me just zoom in there for you. So the ellipse sort of moves gradually from a curve that touches the straight line. See that? So just build this up a little bit more shadow there, stronger core shadow, gradually fading. And then up here I'll leave a highlight and I'll just have a little bit of tone out the back. So what I'm doing, as you you should be able to see now the shadow, the core shadow, always follows the direction of the surface. So here the core shadow follows this direction. Remember, in the sphere, the core shadow followed the direction of the form, right? Here it's following the direction of the form as well, but it's the long direction, right? So this shadow is kind of in a straight line, you could say. Make sense? Now we could, make this neater. Put it on a little surface. Add a little bit of tone behind. These don't have to be very big, as long as you can demonstrate your understanding of the values correctly. They can be fairly small if you wish. All right. Now just building up your tone carefully to finish it off. I'm actually rushing these a little bit. Normally when I demonstrate this to a live class, I'm doing it a little bit slower. Not sure why I'm rushing. I think... Oh, I know why. I've got an appointment after this. That's why I'm rushing. So yeah, I'm just trying to get this sense of straight, the shadows following the highlights, the halftones, the form shadow and the core shadow all following this direction. Okay, I'm not working my pencil like this. See that? If I do it like that, I'm inevitably going to have, a sort of a rough edge, which might be fine in certain drawings, but for the moment I'm trying to, I just did what I said I wasn't doing, but anyway. There's something under there, it's making a mark. Anyway, now I might just add a slightly darker line there to help me build that cast shadow, yeah? And again, remember the cast shadow will get softer at the edges and softer as it moves away from the object. Or lighter is perhaps the best word. And this shape here is now distracting. That's not correct. You wouldn't see a line there, you'll just see tone falling off. Falling off means fading. Something like that. Alright, so that's approximately how you would do a cylinder. Alright. Finally, we're going to use a cone. Now a cone, we're going to do a cone. A cone is very similar to a cylinder, but it's like squeezed together at the top. So, you've got your core shadow, halftone, highlight. But if someone pinched it together, you'd still have your core shadow, but it would run to a point at the top. And you'd still have your halftone and your form shadow and your highlight, but it's all kind of pointed towards the top. See that? So a cone is very similar to a cylinder that's been pinched together, and the shadows are very similar as well, except instead of going towards the vanishing point, they come to a single point close to your object. That's the difference, principally. So let's have a go. Like a cylinder, you have to get good at ellipses to do a cone. But apart from that, it's pretty simple. So I'm going to make mine stand on a desk as if it's sort of standing upright. So I'm just going to, imagine it's sitting about here. There's my base ellipse. And then directly above that in the middle will be my point. And I'm just going to join that with a straight line. So there's the guidelines. I may as well get rid of this line now because it's just going to be in the way, and I could even get rid of that back line because you won't see that either. I'll just sharpen my pencil a little bit. All right, so neaten that line up a bit. Now, this is where most students make mistakes with ellipses. The biggest mistake that students will make with an ellipse is you'll put a shape like that and then you'll have it come to a point. See how that's a point? We don't want that. We want it to be rounded, smooth, no corners. So when you put your lines on, it has to go gradually from a curve to a point, to a straight line. It never makes a corner like that. Okay? So I'm just going to sort of get a little bit closer to my drawing here. And I'm just gradually lifting that up so it sort of comes to a curve. And as long as it meets gradually like that and doesn't come to a corner, make a corner, you'll be fine. Okay, I might even just put a light straight ruler line now that I'm happy with the position. All right, so that's my form or the shape of it. Now I've got to add tone. So think about light. Let's put it over here. That means my shadow is going to start approximately, out the back at the base somewhere over here. In other words, it's going to sort of fall. It's going to fall like this, you could say. Light's going to come down here, and this is going to be projected onto the ground somewhere. Let's say it hits here. Then I just draw another line from here to this tangent of the ellipse. And if I can visualize where that ellipse is out the back, which is about here, I draw a line from here to that point on that back end. And that's where my shadow goes. Again, with all shadows, you won't have a hard edge, you'll have soft edges, so just try to get rid of any of those edges and then just build that up slowly. And fade it. And get it nice and dark. Fairly dark anyway when you're closer to the bottom. Something like that. Now because that's our light side, so this is sort of our bright side, this is our dark side, somewhere over here is the core shadow, and it'll in fact be halfway. It'll start about there. And then the trick is to make this run towards the point. And this is the hardest thing in adding tone to a cone, is getting this shape right. It's got to come right up to a point. Then a little bit more out the back, and then let's say form shadow all the way to here, and then lighter. But look, I'm trying to get it all running up towards the point. You see that? And I'll have a little highlight there, a little bit more grey there. So my halftone or my form shadow can start about here. And my core shadow, darkest, about here. And as long as I'm working sort of in straight lines towards the apex of the cone, it'll start to come to life. Fading the core shadow off a little bit towards the edge. Again, just using this technique to build up. Some tone. For the background, maybe making it a little bit darker about there. So in order to do Friday's task, which is what we're calling a complex geometric character of your own design, you'll be using, I think it's 11 or more simple geometric forms like this that are stitched together or brought together to make a complex character. So you have to get confident with how to draw these individually so you can use them in that drawing. So look, if you can't get this to work the first time, just do another one. It doesn't have to be perfectly neat, as long as it's kind of correct in terms of its use of light and tone, you'll be fine. Alright, so something like that. Again, now we can maybe start to add a little bit more there. And yeah, I'm not going to polish this off perfectly, but I'll leave you to do that for yours. But you can bring in a little bit of line and just get it to the point where you're happy. I think the word care is a good one when we're drawing. If we take care with our drawings, if we put in, you know, the good feelings, you could say, into the drawing itself, drawings tend to look good. They tend to look better when a person has cared about them or drawn them with care. But again, you've got the core shadow, it's not bad. There's a bit of a sort of a blush here or something. I'm reasonably happy with that. All right, so I might stop there. Guys, well done. Good luck. So please, you want to complete your value scale, the cube, the sphere, the cylinder, and the cone, all before Friday. All right, all the best. Well done. and shoot me an email if you've got any questions. Bye for now.